Okay, I'm picking back up for the last part of day 80 with additional information on the female reproductive system. So we'll move right into it here. So our gonads for females are the ovaries. They produce the eggs or the ova, and then hormones like estrogen and progesterone. Each ovary houses what we call ovarian follicles, which consist of these oocytes, which are the immature eggs, and then follicle cells are these different layers of cells that surround the oocyte and nurture it towards maturation there. So again, we're kind of looking at the view here. So each one of these little things here is a primary oocyte, and then it's going to grow and develop. And again, I don't think they actually migrate through the ovary. I could be mistaken on that, but I don't think they do. With the eventual goal of producing the secondary oocyte, which goes through ovulation, and then the remaining part of that follicle becomes the corpus luteum and then eventually degenerates there. All right, so the primary follicle contains that immature oocyte. That's what we saw back over here. And then vesicular or Graafian follicles, which are growing follicles with mature oocytes. So these are these ones over here. And then ovulation, the ruptures when the egg is ready to mature, and this happens roughly every 28 days. The ruptured follicle is transformed into a corpus luteum, as we mentioned. So surrounding the ovaries, we've got several ligaments that kind of keep the ovaries in place. So these are the suspensory ligaments. The anchory, so there's the broad ligament, which is a fold of the peritoneum, and then there's the round ligament. So if we look here, you can see the round ligament here. And then if we go to the next slide, you can see the broad ligament here, which is kind of this here, all this part. And again, there's a right and a left ovary. So this is the ovaries here and here, kind of held in place with those ovarian ligaments, broad ligaments, and the round ligaments there. Okay. So next we want to look at the duct system. So the duct system is a set of tubes, which is the the uterine tube or the fallopian tube, the uterus, which is kind of a Y-shaped tube, I guess, and then the vagina going out that way. So the uterine tubes or fallopian tubes, they form the initial part of the duct system. They receive that ovulated oocyte, and this is where fertilization normally occurs. So when the sperm meet the egg, it should happen in the fallopian tubes. Empties into the uterus. There's usually little or no contact between the ovaries and the uterine tube, and it's supported or enclosed by that broad ligament there. Then there's something called the infundibulum, which is a distal funnel-shaped end of the uterine tube, which, if we can look up here, is this part of it, infundibulum here, with these fimbriae, which are these little finger-like projections, and they kind of wrap around that ovary, and they receive the ciliary side of it, receive the oocyte, and transport it into the uterine tube. Now, occasionally it can happen where the oocyte can actually sneak out past that and end up inside the abdominal cavity at that point, in which case usually it degrades there. So situated between the urinary bladder and the rectum is the uterus, size and shape of a pear, kind of an upside down pear. And it receives, retains, and nourishes the fertilized egg. So after the egg's been fertilized in the fallopian tube, this is where it's going to go to. Again, the broad ligament suspends the uterine tract. The round ligament kind of anchors the uterus, and what's called the uterosacral ligament anchors it posteriorly, which we didn't see in the image, so you don't really need to worry about that. There is three regions. There's the body, the fundus, and the cervix. Body is kind of the main portion. The fundus is the rounded area above, and then the cervix is the narrow outlet that protrudes into the vagina, and there's got a uterine cervical opening, cervical canal that the sperm can move through or the baby can move through. So moving on, if we look at the uterus itself, we see that there's three layers to it. So there's the endometrium. This is the innermost layer, and this is the site of implantation of a fertilized egg. And then during menstruation or the menstrual cycle, this is the part that slows off. It kind of it breaks down. It's nutrient rich, and we don't want to keep it there because it serves as a potential site for bacterial infection. So it comes off and comes out during the menstrual cycle. The myometrium is the middle part, and it consists of smooth muscle, and this is the part that during labor is the part that actually contracts. And then the perimetrium is the outermost layer of the uterus. The vagina is a passageway that extends from the cervix to the exterior part of the body. It serves as a canal that allows the baby or menstrual flow to leave the body. It's the female organ of copulation to receive the penis during sexual intercourse. And then the hymen, which can partially close off the vagina until it's ruptured, which it goes right across the beginning of the vagina there, across there. So the hymen can be there, the vaginal canal is there. And again, we've got that cervix with the cervical opening right there. Okay. So again, just kind of another view, looking at the same thing from a different angle there. So female external genitalia collectively is known as the vulva. It includes what we call the mons pubis, the labia, the clitoris, the urethral orifice, the vaginal orifice, and the greater vestibular glands. And again, kind of the vestibular is kind of the whole opening there, the vestibule is the whole opening there. So this is the mons pubis. So if you picture kind of the pubic bone, right, the pubic bone is right underneath there. So the mons pubis is this layer of adipose tissue and skin over the top of that. And then we've got the labia majora, which come around the outside, labia minora, which are on the inside here. The clitoris is right there. And just like we had a prepuce on the male penis, the foreskin on the penis, there's sometimes called the clitoral hood or the prepuce of the clitoris, which is just on the top of it there. The vestibule is kind of this opening space here. You have the urethral orifice, the vaginal orifice, and then there's these greater vestibular glands, which are right here, and they provide lubrication or secretions during sexual intercourse. And then the perineum is this kind of this whole area here, but it's also kind of this area in between the labia majora where they close off and the anus down there. So it's kind of the external view. So the mons pubis, as we mentioned, fatty area overlying the pubic symphysis. It's covered with pubic hair after puberty. The labia majora is covered with, has skin-covered folds, encloses a vestibule, and the labia minora is delicate and hair-free. The vestibule encloses the labia majora, contains the external openings of the urethra and the vagina, and then secretions lubricate the vagina during intercourse, one on each side there. All right. Clitoris contains erectile tissue. It corresponds to male penis. So similar to penis, and it's hooded by a prepuce, composed of sensitive erectile tissue and swollen with blood during sexual excitement. It lacks a reproductive duct. So like the male penis has the urethra which travels through it. The clitoris does not, so it doesn't form the same way. And the perineum is kind of a diamond-shaped region between the anterior ends of the labial folds, the anus posteriorly, and the ischial tuberosities laterally to the sides there. So that's kind of again looking at all that. Okay. So female reproductive functions and cycles. So the total supply of eggs is determined in a woman by the time she's born. I've heard, I'd have to check this, but something on the order of 400,000 eggs, something like that, at the time of birth, something like that. And then beginning at puberty with the start of the menstrual cycles, menarche again is the name for the starting of the menstrual cycles. And then this continues through menopause, usually late 40s to 50s for women there. Oogenesis is the process of producing the eggs. Oogonia are the female stem cells, and they undergo mitosis to produce primary oocytes that then become the primary follicles and then kind of continue on through meiosis there. The primary oocytes are inactive until puberty, and we have follicle-stimulating hormones, like we saw in males. They stimulate in females as well, but they stimulate the maturation each month of a new oocyte. So cyclically monthly changes constitute the ovarian cycle. So meiosis is what we're looking at here. So the first meiotic division produces a larger secondary oocyte and a smaller one that becomes what we call the polar body. The reason we do this is we want to keep as much of the cytoplasm and everything within one body to give that particular one egg the best chance of growing up there. Secondary oocyte occurs with the release of luteinizing hormone, and then it's surrounded by something called the corona radiata. So here's the oocyte with the corona radiata around it right there. Okay. So it's completed after ovulation. Only if sperm penetrates the oocyte. So two additional polar bodies are produced at that point, and again, those don't become viable. They can't be fertilized. So the 23 chromosomes from the egg combine with the 23 chromosomes of the sperm to give us back to our zygote. And if the secondary oocyte is not penetrated by a sperm, it dies and it doesn't complete meiosis to form an ovum. So in males, we produce 4 functional sperm through meiosis. In females, we produce 1 functional ovum and then 3 polar body cells. I'm just kind of comparing them. Sperm are tiny, motile, which means they kind of moved, and equipped with nutrients and seminal fluids. Eggs are large, non-motile, and has nutrient reserves to nourish the embryo until implantation. So here's just kind of comparing, looking at female meiotic processes here. So one cell goes through mitosis, right? And then eventually we're going to go through childhood, right? Now where this is monthly menopause. This is what's happening every month until menopause. It's gonna, one of these will grow and develop, and then we'll split off, so that becomes a polar body, and then this one will split, and that gives us another polar body. But this one will also divide and give us a total of 3 polar bodies and 1 total ovum there. Okay, so we've kind of looked at this one, but again, kind of that process of primary follicle through growing follicles, through mature follicles or Graafian follicle to the secondary oocyte that is released in ovulation. Okay, so hormones are produced by the follicle cells, and they cause these secondary sexual characteristics: enlargement of breasts, the appearance of axillary and pubic hair. Axillary is armpit hair, if you remember. Increase in fat beneath the skin, particularly in the hips and breast. A widening and a lightening of the pelvis, and the onset of menses or the menstrual cycle. All right. Progesterone is produced by the corpus luteum. So that's that degrading follicle. It continues until the luteinizing hormone diminishes in the blood. Doesn't contribute to the appearance of sexual characteristics, but it does help maintain pregnancy and prepares the breasts for milk production. And I think that gets us, we're done there. So we finished up with part 3 of today's notes on additional female reproductive system notes there. All right, thank you for listening. Bye.